Welcome to Mega Wellness Summit. I'm your host, Nikki Jensen. After talking with many experts on the subject of wellness, I'm discovering the key to health is healing our gut. In order to heal the gut, an expert opinion is critical. That's why we're diving in and getting our gut questions answered by Dr. Jack Tips. He is a pioneer and a big-time leader in the world of health. He brings a message of dynamic, vital health to thousands of people through lectures, seminars, articles, radio, the internet, books, television, and his clinical practice. Dr. Tips is a board-certified homeopathic physician with a PhD in nutrition science. He's authored many books as well as series of articles discussing the latest epigenetic research on the microbiome, candida, and cellular metabolism. Welcome, Dr. Jack Tips. Thank you so much for being on the summit. How are you?
Hey, well, hello, everyone, and hello, Nikki. Pleasure to be here. I'm doing really well. I've fed my gut microbiome today, and it's busy feeding me, so I'm feeling pretty terrific today.
That's awesome. How did you do that?
Ooh, I had a really terrific breakfast and had a little kefir water to boot and a little sauerkraut on the side. So really enjoying.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's all about eating bugs now, so I'm teasing. But it's often we call the bacteria that inhabit our bodies. It's the official scientific terminology. We just call them bugs.
I love bugs. Good bugs are great, right?
Right.
That's what I'm discovering with all of these interviews is that's the secret to health, is putting the good bacteria back into our gut.
Oh, you're so right, and getting the proper biodiversity back. We have each person's genetics has their own need for different species, and each of our microbiomes are unique to us. It's almost like a fingerprint. There's racial microbiomes, there's cultural microbiomes, and so forth. And, Nikki, that might even be a word that a lot of people aren't familiar with yet because it's coming out pretty new in science, but the word now is being bounced around. So like having to learn the word mitochondria 5 years ago and all of a sudden finding that biology term in the public domain and people, average people on the street talking about a mitochondria, I think I better start off with what this microbiome is because it might be a word that people don't quite know what we're talking about. And the microbiome is actually referring to all the DNA of the human body and the bacteria and fungus and other microbial species that live inside and on our bodies. So the microbiome of a person is in their nose and on their skin and in their lungs and their mouth and their intestines. And then just to be accurate, when we talk about the bacteria, the good guys, we know them as probiotics and why people eat yogurt or they're told to eat yogurt on TV. That's the microbiota, and that word is specifically talking about all the bugs that live in the GI tract that digest our food and make our vitamins and hopefully make us healthy and not make us sick, which it can do if they're the bad guys in there. So it's all about the quality and the biodiversity of the microbiota and their contribution to the whole of a human being, which is called the microbiome. And I tell you what, the scientists now coming out of the study of the genome of the human being, you might remember 14, 15 years ago, the computers figured out every gene that a human being has. Coming out of that, we have this concept now that is now official science that what is a human being includes the bacterial DNA. So the scientists have redefined what it is to be a human being on this planet, and we no longer can think of ourselves as our body, mind, and spirit. We have to think of ourselves as our body, mind, and spirit, and all the viruses, bacteria, fungus, protozoa, and microorganisms that live on and about our bodies, because all this DNA is talking to each other, and it makes a comprehensive whole. So there, we've just redefined, starting this visit with you, Nikki, what it is to be a human being.
I love it. And you went into the microbiome and completely, now I understand what the microbiome is. Now, this is a fairly new term in my book to really define essentially being a human being.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of people were surprised, about the same time the scientists kicked Pluto out of our solar system, and it's no longer a planet, and we all didn't get to vote on it. They just decided, and now the scientists have indeed decided that the gut microbiota has such a powerful influence over our bodies, over what we think, over how we feel, over if we have food cravings, how much we weigh, what mate we choose, who we fall in love with. All of these things, the bacteria have a say. Our set point of inflammation, our ability of our immune systems to perform, when a child is ready to be weaned, when a young girl has menarche, and maybe they call it menarche or menarche or something like that, but it's it's the term of the first menses. But all of these are coming from bacterial signals, and most of these bacteria are within the gut, within our intestines. So now science is just blowing us away with how important this gut microbiome is. And what we're alarmed to learn then is every time we're taking an antibiotic, we're killing some of our species off, and if they can't bounce back, we lose some of the biodiversity. And we're also finding that a high-sugar diet is growing the wrong species, and that genetically modified food is disturbing the gut microbiome and inhibiting what nutrients that they can live with. And so all of a sudden we wake up to this knowledge and we go, holy cow, we're not doing things right. What are we going to do? You may remember, like way back, right, when the whole world got worried about Candida. That's kind of going back in our history, and everybody suddenly started finding out that a yeast could convert into a fungus and cause problems with our health, and it was a problem in the gut. So we've really had now 30, 40, maybe even 50 years that we've been dealing with this knowledge, but now science is just blasting new information as they uncover the relationships and the symbiotic relationship with our gut microbiota and its huge influence over our lives.
That is absolutely fascinating. There's so much to it. It's hard to wrap your brain around all of it, because if you're new to this concept, really we have been indoctrinated with such a different way of thinking that really this is giving people a whole different way of looking at life and our health.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. I know you've been doing this for a very long time, and I know, way back in 1983, I was, sorry to say, but I was 1 year old. You wrote a book called Conquer Candida and Restore Your Immune System that really became an underground classic around the time that Drs. Crook and Trowbridge were pioneering the medical position that Candida overgrowth was real, and it should be treated with nystatin. How did you contribute to that emerging paradigm?
Oh, boy, that was some exciting times, because we really got to look at how strong we were in our natural health model, and if we could really differentiate it from the medical model, because and the great contribution by Dr. Crook and by Dr. Trowbridge was that medicine was totally in denial about Candida being a real issue, and they wrote their books and say, look, my patients have hypothyroidism, they have PMS, they feel lightheaded and spacey, they're not having good lives. I come in with nystatin, sometimes with Flagyl, these drugs, and I kill the yeast fungus. And they have these Herxheimer reactions, and they get better. A Herxheimer reaction means that they felt really bad on the treatment, that they went into some toxicity. And so they wrote these books all about, okay, we found a new bad bug, and now we're killing it. And so I think the role that the Conquer Candida and Restore Your Immune System, which was actually a kind of a doctoral thesis of mine, the role that it played is it just stood up and said, Candida is the canary in the coal mine. That means it's an early warning to us that something is really wrong. It's actually our friend. So one of my themes in the book was Candida is your friend. Well, that was as soon as everybody learned that they had a new enemy to hate. I tell you, hate gets you a lot more traction out there in the marketplace. And they said, oh no, there's a new thing to hate, and we got to kill it. And so there you go, right back in the medical model. You find something you don't like and you try to kill it instead of trying to correct the cause. And so the Conquer Candida book was showing people how to work in the gut microbiome, how to knock off Candida with safer materials than drugs, and that maybe dietary restrictions didn't have to be the way to do it. But if you ate a good diet, let me put that caveat in there, because we were putting out then a diet that was basically protein, fats, and vegetables, and it was already not dealing with much grain and a lot of the sugars. And so that's probably the role that little fledgling in book had, and the reason why it was popular, you said, in the underground, so to speak, was because it was going back to the true natural health principle that we have to go correct the cause, not just kill the enemy. And gosh, what if we took that principle and took it forth into the world's politics and said, we don't necessarily have to kill the enemy, what if we correct the cause? It'd be a very interesting concept. I often say everything we need to know if we wanted to really solve the Middle East crises and we wanted to solve the issues with Iraq and Afghanistan and all this kind of stuff, the lessons are in our tummies. We need to really work with our gut instinct on some things, and it means collectively everyone would have to do that. But the point is, it's just absolutely profound, the microcosm and the macrocosm. And so this was a topic that had been talked about for over 100 years. And it was big time in the newspapers, particularly in Europe, as an argument between Louis Pasteur and Antoine Beecham. And these guys, it was like the Super Bowl back then. So, people weren't really that interested in if Jen has gotten married and things like that, or whatever is grabbing the media right now today in the entertainment world. It was science was budding, and people were interested, and this was the Super Bowl going on between Beecham and Pasteur, as Pasteur argued that we found the bacteria, let's kill the bacteria, and we can all live a great life. And that's what the microscope was doing. And then Beecham was saying, the bacteria, they're going to come and go. They're going to change. They're going to adapt. The issue is the terrain. If you take care of the cause of the terrain, meaning your inner nutrition and your inner cleanliness and not having a lot of toxins and so forth in the body, then your body would take care of all of this. And so, anyway, it was an interesting story because recorded at Pasteur's deathbed, his final words in Louis Pasteur's life, the great scientist who brought us pasteurization of milk, and credit him for saving probably thousands and thousands of lives to fecal contamination of milk. That was a real problem, but he said on his deathbed, the microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything. Beecham was right. And they just wrote that off as being the mumblings of a person who was dying and of no significance, and we went on from there. Well, anyway, that was what came out of that time frame, and the role that Conquer Candida had there is it was the the radical position that Candida is our friend, and I'll tell you that was exonerated later as we got up to Dietrich Klinghardt, who came out about 10 years later and said that the Candida fungus will build biofilms, which means they build a protective dome over themselves and they can hide from the immune system, and they'll build this secret colony in our bodies and wrap themselves up like an M&M with a sugar coating, and that they'll build a biofilm, and that they'll do this and incorporate an element of mercury. So again, around that time, it was the big issue was the dental fillings, the silver amalgam dental fillings, putting mercury vapor into the lungs, putting mercury particles down into the GI tract. And so the Candida could take that mercury, and maybe they use it like a nuclear reactor, an energy source, or an ionic grid or something, but they'll actually put that mercury into the biofilm, and they seem to do okay with it. So there you are. The trash terrain, meaning horrible toxic mercury, is in your teeth, and it's going down your throat. The Candida is using it, so when people like Drs. Crook and Dr. Trowbridge, when they went in with their nystatin and killed the Candida, that mercury was released into the gut. And if you had some methylator, meaning if you had some bacteria that could process that mercury, they could make it like 10 times more poisonous. And it could
oh, my God.
Yeah, and then it's absorbed into the body. And because of leaky gut, if the brain barrier to the blood was weak, a person could end up getting that mercury into their brain. And then that's what started the whole thing about detox and how to get mercury out of the body. So we're just kind of taking a flying leap here through the last 50 years of history, which maybe affects a lot of your listeners. If they're the baby boomer generation, they lived all of this. You know, we went through the hypoglycemia and then the Candida and then the heavy metal mercury stuff, and we've all been trying to figure our way through it. What's really coming to fruition now, Nikki, is that the gut microbiome has answers for all of these things. We're sitting on the answers. It just took 21st century science to find this amazing relationship between our bodies and the gut.
So, Dr. Titz, let me kind of reiterate or wrap my brain around what you just said. So, in essence, you have Candida. You try to kill the Candida. If there's mercury that's attached to the Candida and you kill the Candida, it releases the mercury, causing you to be even sicker than you were before.
Well, that was the Herxheimer reactions, that the early pioneers who were trying to treat Candida would run into. People would say, "Oh, I have Candida die-off, and I feel so bad. My tongue is coated, I'm headachy," and that type of thing. And they were waiting for their bodies to be able to detox. Well, the fungal forms, when they're dead, are quite toxic as well. So anyone could have what was called die-off, and the official terminology in medicine was Herxheimer reactions, which is a little bit was tied in with philosophy of you have to get worse to get better, which is not necessarily true. So you got it. Yeah, that's but it's not just mercury. The Candida could be doing lead, nickel, other heavy metals. It could be doing chemicals and that type of thing.
Well, you have a different kind of strategy. What are you doing differently than that? So are you not going after Candida first?
Well, there's a time that you may need to, if you have the overgrowth and it's overpowered the immune system and the immune system is not responding, a lot of times that's because the brain is not really paying attention. Like if a person has the leaky gut, it automatically creates a leaky brain. And it's the same molecules that open the doors. And so a person could have a little bit of some toxicity in their brain, which just means inflammation. And if the brain is not conducting the immune system properly, then the Candida is just weakening the host at command central as well. You've probably heard maybe of people or what's called brewery syndrome, or that people can literally ferment so much sugars with the candida in their gut that they become intoxicated from the fermentation product, which is alcohol. And so a lot of people with the candida back in the old days would say, I can feel dizzy, or I can stagger, and that type of thing. And this was not only maybe a little bit of the body making enough alcohol to disturb the brain, but also the inflammation of the brain. Particularly, we're concerned about the hypothalamus and which is a part of the brain, and how it regulates hormones in the body. So anyway, things get fouled up like that, and so the strategy came out of this for natural health. We can say that in the real life, there's a time to kill and there's a time to heal. It kind of makes you think of Ecclesiastes or something, or the song that the Byrds recorded back in those days called "Turn, Turn, Turn," but which quoted the Ecclesiastes, everything in its season. But the point there is, yes, there's a time to knock down the candida just because it's just way too much. But to do it, you have to be able to go after biofilms. And this is this information was not being addressed with things like Flagyl and Nystatin and so forth. It was mainly getting the free-floating colonies, and maybe with long enough poisoning of the body, it would knock down enough of the candidas and allow some other species, let's say probiotics species, to take over. But botanicals are very superior. Everyone's heard of Pau d'Arco or Echinacea and golden seal and grapefruit seed extracts and oregano oil. In fact, most of the spices that are on the kitchen shelf. The reason Columbus was sailing west to get east was not because they were tasty. Humanity knew these herbs and spices were antimicrobial and that they contributed greatly to health. So today it seems like we've forgotten, have we not, that these spices are our medicines. And we think of them as, a little seasoning in the soup. But these were things that were keeping people alive. So that's why the explorers went afar, and people would pay so much for the spices, as they were genuinely medicines. But these botanicals do something that drugs don't do. They interfere with a bacterial or a fungal ability to build biofilm. They interfere with them to share information to fight. One of the big challenges of medicine today is that the antibiotics are being read by the bacteria. It's called quorum sensing for the term. But the bacteria read the antibiotic and mutate. And then they tell everybody else how to mutate, and therefore you have something called antibiotic resistance. So welcome to MRSA. MRSA, and then these deadly bacteria are all being created by antibiotics. And so the bacteria can mutate fast, and they survive. And a lot of these antibiotics never went into the biofilm anyway. It just mutated the bacteria, got the planktonic, which are the free floaters. It's a term for the free floaters. It got them knocked off, and the patient gets well until those biofilms then either cause another problem or they revert back. Remember, Beecham was right. These bacteria mutate. And that early argument was that a fungus could turn into a virus, could turn into a bacteria, and Pasteur was saying, I don't see it under the microscope, so it's not true. And they had various etheric explanations for this. But today we see it, a wonderful yeast that is part of our GI tracts that ferment sugars and make nutrients for our body in the wrong circumstances, where they get too much sugar and they have too many chemicals. They can convert themselves right out of their phylum, right out of their kingdom, you might say, and turn into a fungus then the fungus will release toxins, and those toxins make us sick. So that's the problem. We take one of our friends, yeast, which make up our microbiome, and our diet and antibiotics. Remember, these guys are opportunistic. So when we knock off the good guys accidentally with an antibiotic, these guys take over because they weren't affected by the antibiotic. And so we had what we noticed back in the late 70s and 80s when this was going on last century, we noticed that antibiotics would cause a yeast infection or something like that. And then the person had a fungal problem because they took an antibiotic. Big lesson about, we're not doing it right. So the botanicals, if we'd used the herbs instead, we would have had the true medicines for the human body. And because they disrupt those candida biofilms and the ability of candida to fight, the ability for them to mutate. Enzymes, again, another natural health tool, can break down components in those biofilms. So all your listeners may not know, may not have pecan trees in their yard, but down here in Texas, we love our pecan trees. But they have a problem sometimes. These pecan trees get a predator or part of their life cycle involved with something called a webworm. And if you've ever seen a picture or you Google webworm, you would see these like cotton candy globs in a pecan tree. And so there are all these little filament fibers everywhere, and it's a web. And inside that web are all these worms, and they will totally strip that section of the tree right down to the bark. No leaves, everything, nibble, nibble. And they're protected in their web. That's a lot like a biofilm. But down here in Texas, if we don't want to spray, we want to raise organic pecans, you can't go spray poison on those webs and knock out the webworms. We just take a little fly fishing rod and we go up and slap the web, just kind of put a little slice through it. As soon as we break open that biofilm, it won't be but an hour before a red wasp shows up, and the red wasp will go right in to that biofilm, and it'll start pulling out those little worms, which might be 2-3 inches long, and they love it's their natural food. And so all we do is go damage the web and let nature take its course. And so the red wasp is our friend. It's the same thing in the body with enzymes. The enzymes will crack open a hole in these biofilms. The immune system will go in there, or another probiotic species will go in there and destroy the candida. So we can disrupt them with botanicals. We can disrupt with enzymes. And we could also use a chelator. And that's something that would pull a heavy metal into itself and bond with it. So that little bit of mercury or nickel or lead or something that might be in a candida biofilm, we just pull it right out, like magnetic attraction with a chelating agent, like charcoal. And that would disrupt the colony. So, see, using natural methods, we actually excel in helping the body overcome candida, and we're really, we need to do that because you might say an enemy of our health has gotten a hold of us. But remember, we're not just about killing the enemy. We have to correct the cause, and that's where the nutrition has excelled so much. We've been telling people now for over 100 years, quit eating the refined sugar, because that's feeding these errant bacteria. And so look at the voice of natural health. And while there's 1,000 different diets and 1,000 different opinions, there are certain rallying cries for all of natural health. And it would be to reduce the carbohydrates, or to get off the hybridized grains. These are all feeding either inflammation or bacterial species we don't want. And as we get back to a more wholesome diet, you might say more what our ancestors were doing with whole foods, then we find that the gut microbiota responds accordingly. We have huge control over the species that live within us by our diet, and frankly, even by our thoughts, by our immune system, and by what our brains know we need for balance. So it is a collective group effort that's going on, and we do find the natural health model and the natural health supplements for this type of strategy. Yep, you got to knock down the bad guys, and you got to build up the good guys. But what comes in a probiotic pill is not the right species for every person. And so we come to a new principle. If you build it, they will come. That's the law of nature. And so what we're really doing after we knock down the Candida and we use probiotics as peacekeepers, because they'll take up some niches and they'll keep the bad guys away, and then you have people that will start fermenting vegetables and making kefir water and coconut kefir and things where they're getting the lactobacillus species, which are transitory, to get them to start helping change the terrain. And it all comes around that in the natural health movement today, we're busy terraforming. We're creating that new terrain, the kind of terrain that Beecham was arguing in the newspapers with Pasteur about, saying you've got to have your good terrain. If you have your good terrain, then your health prospers.
In order to detox mercury, is the only way to get mercury out of your body is through chelation?
You know, I kind of just wonder if any time I hear a kind of an ultimatum or the only way to do it, I think eventually if there's a mercury, it's a very much a rogue molecule, and the body needs to chelate it with something. And so that might be a good statement, Nikki, where you just say the only way to get it out is a chelate. But it's not the only, if you're talking about like IV chelation, no, that's not the only way. You know, because we'll see like with the pioneers such as, like Dr. William Ray or somebody in Dallas who became one of the first environmental medical doctors, these people started employing, let's say, the far infrared sauna to sweat out the toxins. And so the body can get rid of the mercury when it has what it needs in order to transport it out. And if the mercury's gone into the brain or into the thyroid, a chelator would be good. Now, some of this mercury's already been chelated, and so it's sitting there in the body. Maybe it's been stored in a fat cell, but it's chelated. It's not just a free element of mercury. It's chelated. And so it already has a bond. And so you either need to bring a stronger bond that then can chelate and take it out of the body, or the body just needs to have the wherewithal to drag it out and throw it away. And it'll most likely do that because it has to go, in most cases, it's going to have to go to the liver, to the gallbladder, and then out into the small intestine, and then it'll come along, and if you have enough fiber in your diet, it'll bond there and come on out of the body. And if you're doing a detox, it might be good to use something like superactivated charcoal or something like that to go ahead and bond with any mercuries and heavy metals to bring them out of the body. So yeah, definitely it's a huge subject now to how to cleanse the body and get these heavy metals, which we get in our food, to get these things out, because they're all inflammatory and they are all disruptive to the cellular life processes.
Well, not only in the food, it's, there's metals in the air and in vaccines, and it's kind of getting harder and harder to run away from these heavy metals. So I think it's really
right. Even the health nut on the organic farm has got an issue, and if that doesn't work, Fukushima's bringing radiation in the air and so forth, and
exactly.
Humanity. I often cite humanity for being the parrot in the bird cage. We've just kind of we haven't changed the newspaper, and we're kind of fouling up the whole planet in a really terrible way. And statistically, we see horrendous diseases now affecting our children, and that's where the heart just breaks.
And you know what I'm kind of coming to the realization is that we really need an expert such as yourself to work with to really look at different aspects of your health. It's really hard to do this on your own. And you have a program and different ways of looking at your health and your life that really puts things into perspective on really how to get deep into what healthy really is.
Well, you're right. And as a natural health practitioner, it's really been one of the major thoughts every day over the decades of how do we prioritize, because science is really doing wonderful research. A lot of it, of course, we're jaded by the fact that it's being hired out by big pharma to support the drug industry, and the conclusions are already determined before the study starts and things like that. So I'm sorry to say, there's a lot of rigged studies that are even tricking the great minds of medicine and science for a while. But the herbs are being looked at, and these are being done without the big grants. But India wants to show the validity of their Ayurvedic tradition, and so they're finding some like curcumins and a lot of the herbs, frankly, that make up a good bowl of curry have powerful anti-cancer qualities to them, anti-inflammatory, that they bring in the antioxidants that save our energy processes in our body from destruction. So all of this is going on, but the big preoccupation has always been, what do you do first? Do you just take someone and cleanse them? And there have been people that have advocated that, and some people can't do it. They're already too weak. They're too compromised. And there's a time that cleansing could be very, very dangerous. If you drug all the toxins that are inside the cells now of our body, and you drug them out, and you don't have clear pathways through the lymph and the liver to get them out of the body, they could just go into another tissue. And the body doesn't have the energy to do it. They could cross the blood-brain barrier. Maybe you have a bad day with leaky gut, and then you're pulling mercury out of your cells, and it goes right up into your brain. And so detox is now a subject that's become a little more specialized. We have to be very careful because the naturopaths go back to their father of medicine, whose name was Hippocrates, and Hippocrates told us, do no harm. And so it's very, very important in doing that. So I'll give you a quick hint here of where the research and the state of the art is today. Number one, take care of the gut microbiome. It's already been deranged by the very sad diet. SAD means Standard American Diet. And so we've got to go back and get that relationship with Earth reestablished in our bodies, and that means organic foods that are non-genetically modified, whole foods. That's what our bodies are built on. It's what we can't help it. It's not just something nice to say. Our genetics are coming from our ancestors. Our bodies have learned, as hunter-gatherer species, our bodies have learned to be eating massive amounts of herbs and roots and barks and these little botanicals everywhere. Did anyone watch the Hobbit movies? Every time those little hobbits are moving around on their journeys, when they do the journey shot in those films, they're always stopping to pick a flower or nibble some grass or something. And I just thank them for that view of humanity, because our bodies depend on the herbs and the plants for our epigenetic expression. That means what we're bringing out of our DNA to run our bodies. Epigenetics means our our information bank that can change for better or for worse based on it. Well, it can turn on a dime. We're not having to wait anymore 20,000 years for a mutation. We human beings survive because we can change literally overnight with what's going on in the environment or what's going on with our diet. And so, number one, microbiome, we've got to get our tummies. Hippocrates, going back to that great soul, he said all diseases begin in the stomach. Wow. I mean, did he have a crystal ball or what? Because it is the gut microbiome that when we have the pathogens raising our inflammation, and there's more than 20 ways that pathogens raise this thing called inflammation in our bodies that's destroying our hearts and our arteries, and it's Alzheimer's, and it's cardiovascular disease, and it's diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. All of this is being driven by inflammation. Well, we get these post-antibiotic cultures growing in our system, and we destroy some of the species that our body and brain are needing. We're suddenly high and dry. It's like, you have your appendix cut out, you have your tonsils and adenoids cut out, you've lost a portion of your immune system. And you just don't get it back. Well, when we destroy our gut microbiome, we don't get it back unless we build it so they will come. And that's the saving grace of nature right now. So number one, we want to improve our health. We've got to improve our gut microbiome. Now, the other big arena of the 21st century is going on inside our cells. And that's where our cellular metabolic processes are being disturbed by the gut microbiome having the wrong species, because DNA talks to DNA, and by all the toxins of the environment and the inflammation. One of the things, if you'd like the lesson, so many people are trying to put bioidentical hormones on their skin, and there's so many hormone issues, from weak adrenals to a pandemic of hypothyroidism. But here's the thing, it's not only the tissue, the adrenals and the thyroid, that are off. It's the cells themselves, they're receptors that need to receive the message. And so when those cell membranes are inflamed, whether it's what's called the plasma membrane, where the cell is in contact with blood and lymph and other cells, or whether it's the mitochondrial membranes, or any of the inner organelle of the cell's membranes, or whether it's the nuclear membrane that surrounds and protects our DNA. If any of those membranes are inflamed, these hormones can't connect. They can't connect to the receptor. The docking mechanism is not there. And so the problem is the inflammation. So that would be the other thing we have to look at. We lower the inflammation by working with the gut microbiome. Then that opens the door to cleaning out the cells and getting heavy metal detox and supporting the liver and supporting the thyroid and the adrenals. And so we're trying to always say, what do you do first? When someone just comes in and their health is a total mess, and they say, what can we do to help? So if we have time just to relax and say, okay, we're going to rebuild from the ground up. And what do? We have to tear the house down virtually to the foundation. Well, the foundation is the gut microbiome. And so that's a wonderful place to start. Get rid of some of the pathogens. Get rid of the nasty biofilms. And now bring in the peacekeepers, I call them, because you're not trying to build your gut on your supplemental probiotics. They're just not the species that are necessarily right for your body. But here's the thing. You put enough good guys in with probiotic supplementation, your immune system will start telling them, you either mutate the way I want you to, or you got to hit the highway. And it makes room for others to come that will be coming from the soil, from the air, and you'll get your microbiota if you build the terrain, you'll start getting your microbiome back. And that's the saving grace. So it's always like we push nature to where we wonder if we've gone too far, and yet still there's this wonderful note of optimism that, yes, we can, even in this toxic world, yes, we can have exemplary health. Think of our ancestors. They breathed terrible gases from volcanoes. Sometimes the water would lay over mineral deposits, and some of those mineral deposits might be toxic metals. And so, yeah, the problem is we're concentrating. We're actually taking bauxite and turning it into aluminum or something, and then turning that into fluoride, and then sticking it in the water and poisoning everybody with fluoride in the water, and which is a huge thyroid disruptor and brain dumber downer. So, it's time that we take a look, and we've been living under an illusion that science would only do the right thing or that government would do the right thing. And in essence, everyone's being bought out by the big interest. So it really comes down to the law of nature. Ignorance is no excuse. And we do have to fight and educate ourselves to do it. But please, let me tell you, Nikki, and let me tell everyone listening, do not fall in the gloom and doom. We've got huge work to do, but let me tell you, our bodies can adapt and survive. And one of the things that's saving our lives is supplementation. The fact that we can get coenzyme Q10 and not have that censured. We can get vitamin C, and we can get these super nutrients, and we can augment what's no longer in the food, and we can also start growing some of our own food, because that's going to give, even in an apartment house, you can have a vertical garden. And what you're going to start getting is soil-based organisms back into your gut microbiome. And you'll start having fresh food that actually ripened on the vine and represents the bounty of nature and communicates with your very cells and your very DNA that at least there's nutritional components that your body can take and restore itself. So, yeah, we've got to do a lot to counter what's in the air and what's in the food and what's not in the food anymore and what's in the water. Austin, Texas, where I'm standing right now, it has some pretty darn good water. We only have maybe 130 toxic chemicals in our water, and of course that's counting all the Prozac and estrogen that's being urinated into the water system and being recycled and coming back out the faucet. And we just don't have any fracking going on here. So, like I'm saying, Austin's got pretty good water, and yet we've got, I know, 6 known carcinogens in the water, and they're using chloramines to purify the water. And on one hand, chlorine has saved lives because we don't have cholera epidemics sweeping through our cities. But the side effect of chlorine is it's a thyroid disruptor, just like fluoride. Chlorine and fluorides are halogens, and they're both being put in municipal water. So, it's like we've been trading for many years our health for security, you might say. And so we need a different model of how to get the right foods and the right materials into our bodies, and now we see that there is already the onslaught against supplements. I tried to ship a package of herbal products to a lady in Norway, and I got a letter back from the Norwegian government that they now considered the herbs to be drugs and that their citizens were not allowed to have such things. One of the herbs was Cascara sagrada. So they sent me a list of about 200 herbs now that are just the bread and butter of the herbal industry that they don't allow in. That's the Codex Alimentarius that's doing that. I'm afraid it's going to get worse, and the noose gets tightened. So we must look in that and go gloom and doom and all of that. I'm so much knowing that we do have a way. Nature has proven itself again and again to win and to be superior to these human limitations. And again, we all need to be learning how to grow some of our own food and to get some of the superfoods that give us a chance to breathe and live healthy lives and have healthy brains in this toxic world. And where do you find those? You find them right here on your summit, Nikki, and I know some of the other speakers personally that you're having, and their message is bona fide, and these are the pioneers and people that really care about their fellow human beings, and they're sharing their information on how to have healthy lives. So
absolutely.
Number one, you've got to look in the mirror and absolutely know in your heart that you have the resources to live a healthy life, and then you do that for yourself, then you can share that message. You've earned the right to share that message. And I hope you can hear it in my voice. I'm 65 years old. It wasn't but not too many years ago, I hiked the Milford Track over the Continental Divide in southern New Zealand, a 15-mile hike a day for 3 days, so that was 35 miles. And the body works. I'm not bragging. I don't, have to work out every day or anything. It's just saying I'm living the best life that I can because I know that nutrition is the foundation of health, and health is our true wealth. So every extra dime and effort I pay to nourish this body, it repays me with the mental acuity to enjoy the world and the physical ability to move around and, hike up a pyramid if I need to or something like that, that our bodies are truly wondrously made. And we have to trust that if we take care of our livers, that they can be doing the detox. And periodically we do need to detox from the environment and have that time to shut down and take care of our health. And the challenges are great, but personally, my experience and my studies of history and humanity is nature perseveres, and that's a powerful.
I love the way that you look at that. I really love the way that you look at that, because you have a different way of looking at how to get healthy, and you really hold the key and the answers to how to really live a healthy life.
Well, that's just, there's those of us, and you have a lot of them on your summit here, that's their mission in life. I'd say, that just happened to be my mission. That's the thing that interests me. Even from grade school, I was in the health food stores. It's just, you walk your destiny. Other people are made to be football players or, good mothers and good fathers, and everyone has their very precious role. But some of us are called to look into the fact that if we all had better health, we would not have crime. If we all had better health, we could have peace on earth. If we all had better health, we would be taking care of this planet for future generations and not handing our kids a garbage can and telling them to go live in it. So maybe that had too much of an edge to it. But, we have such a gorgeously beautiful planet. Do you not have your heart just get enraptured at a sunset, or I don't mean a pollution sunset. I mean looking out over the rolling hills. Or I was just in Puerto Rico yesterday. I was lecturing to some biological dentists there, and I was just marveling at the lush vegetation of the rainforest there, and I actually realized that I was becoming more hyper-aware. I was having tingling in my spine as I just realized all these massive plants growing were expressing, life They're reaching for the sun. They're all competitive. They're living the warfare too. They have the same suffering that we humans have to get food and water and survive. But I think the reason why I'm saying this story, it was very uplifting to have that moment with nature, but it reminded me that in the soil is a microbiome. In that soil are fungal forms, nematodes, and bacteria, and without them in the soil, these plants could not live. The roots do not take nutrients from the soil. The roots get the nutrients from the bacteria and fungal forms that live on the roots. And the fungal forms are processing the dirt. It's the same story within our bodies. We do not get nutrition from eating a carrot. We get nutrition from our bacteria eating the carrot that we ate. We're just processing the food like a mother bird for our bacteria. We've got to cultivate our inner terrain, and it will reward us according to the laws of nature, the covenant between the microbe and our immune system and our brain. It will reward us with the best of health if we just take care of our bacteria. So now you can think, when you eat something and you do have that organic food and you've got that wonderful organic olive or the organic avocado and you're eating that you are preparing that food for the bacterial species in your GI tract so that they can process it and put the nutrients into the microvilli of your intestines, where it's taken up and goes to the liver for humanization, where your liver puts a molecule of saturated fat, yes, I said saturated fat, on the protein, and it moves these molecules around to the cells, and your cells take these molecules as glucose for energy and minerals and vitamin catalyst and, most important, the fats. And it takes these molecules and it gives us something that is our life experience. And it comes from our cells, the ability to make energy, the ability to have all of this amazing equipment that we're born with, to have it function right. Does that not just make perfect sense? We have to take care of the soil, to take care of the plants, and they grow in the sun and bring all 5 elements together, and all it comes into something that we're crunching on as we organize our meal. And what a great time to be alive when we have food so overly available. I mean, think somebody grew an organic cow, grass-fed organic cow in Wisconsin, and somebody grew that rutabaga, and we're able to ship it all around, and we have this full and varied diet, and we can get organic spices and be including them. We need them desperately, and we can be growing these things in our garden. So that's where we get our fundamental vitality. And then the great thing about having the big brain for a species on this planet, we're having the opposable thumb, having an imagination, and having our upright mobility. We're the king of creation here. We've got this whole world as our playground, and then we just run into others that don't share the vision, and that hurt things. So life is indeed the challenge, but the best thing we can do for our life experience is, hey, let's take care of our gut microbiome and then have that work on through and start affecting our brains and our cellular metabolic processes.
Wow. You just made me really realize how synergistic we are in the entire world. Everything is interconnected, and we can't look at ourselves as just an individual. We have to look at ourselves as... Well,
I think Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, comes to mind, where he proved rather conclusively scientifically that we are all interconnected, is exactly what you're saying. And there's science behind this. And when we start learning more about etheric communications, that DNA is indeed the universal language of all life species. Scientists today could take a strand of DNA and tell you exactly if it's animal, mineral, or vegetable. They can tell you male or female. They can tell you what it does and what it doesn't do. It can tell you its physical capabilities. It can tell you if it's predator or prey. And all of our secrets are revealed in that strand of DNA, and DNA can resonate and talk with other DNA. And here's something that might be interesting. Every one of your cells, except for red blood cells, has maybe, let's say, 4,000 mitochondria that produce the energy of life, the chemical energy of life. For those that like the big words, that's adenosine triphosphate, the chemical energy of life. That's what makes you alive. And as long as you can make ATP, you have energy, you can think, you can move, and you can stay alive. And when that winds down, it's over. And so those 4,000 little mitochondria that make ATP in every cell, it's not your DNA. It's bacterial DNA.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's like within every cell of your body, you've got foreign alien DNA making energy for your life. So
wow.
we've harnessed those life forms as maybe we're the big boss, and we've harnessed them, and we're using them. But let me tell you, those DNA, they can communicate with either the probiotics or the pathogens in your gut. Science has now found that in the case of a woman, if she has certain species of pathogen vaginally, if she has a certain species of pathogen on her skin and a certain species of pathogen in her gut, that she'll get psoriasis. So the body will respond and go into a hyperkeratotic skin expression, which is just a fancy way of saying the what they call the heartbreak of psoriasis. The scaly red hyperkeratotic patch. Hyperkeratotic means the cells are over-proliferating. That will happen. The body will choose to do that in response to the pathogen. So suddenly, science is looking at a whole new way of being concerned about pathogens and how they're affecting our very DNA expression, which is called epigenetics. So these guys are for good or for bad. Now, what keeps that from happening in our bodies? Because there's a lot of these pathogens that we could have a pathogenic E. coli, and then someone's going to have a bladder infection and this type of thing. What keeps them roped in? What keeps them from bothering us are the good guys, the good bacteria. And so that's the relationship between our bodies and the world. If we've got lots and lots of good bacteria, they're really our immune system. Our immune system is made to keep them in check, even the good guys. But so this constant warfare that goes on microbially, we want to surround ourselves and put within ourselves the diverse good species, and then when there's a few bad guys running around, they actually do us favors. So there's this Streptococcus or even MRSA or something could actually be serving a good purpose in our bodies as long as there's enough of the good guys to keep them in check. And so they might be using them in a biofilm, and sometimes we need a little riffraff in society, and that's the law of nature. So anyway, that's why it's so very, very important when we're being threatened and the media is fanning the flames of fake pandemics and, the swine flu and the bird flu and this type of thing, which ends up scaring people and selling a lot of drugs. The thing really, it comes down to your happiness. Your safety in this world is based on the bacteria. And when we understand that, we'll start eating to feed our bacteria, and we'll take probiotics, and we'll ferment some vegetables, and we'll start doing these things that your summit is teaching people, that they'll be able then to stand strong. Because again, wind up with Beecham here, the terrain is everything. What are you doing today for your inner terrain? And then you might say, well, Jack, what did you do today? And I'll say, well, I had 4 ounces of a kefir water that I grow. I have my little bugs in the jar, and I grow them perpetually. It's kind of like having another child in the house because I can't get too far away from them. They have to be fed. And
what do you feed them with?
Well, the ones that I'm growing, like the turbinado, sugar the best, and so I'm feeding them the turbinado. Makes them kind of brown.
Turbinado sugar.
Yeah, the kefirs are sugar eaters, and just if anyone's new to that and they think, oh my goodness, what's he doing? Well, you don't. When you drink the kefir water, you don't get sugar. It's the little bugs they've enjoyed all the sugar, and that's what their metabolism is growing on. And when you drink the water, you don't. You drink it at the right time. You don't get the sugar. And it's not converted into vinegar or alcohol. You're catching it right. For me, it's 3 to 4 days here in the Texas internal environment. So my little guys in a quart jar will go about 3 to 4 days, and then they're just right. And it's like drinking a very dry champagne. It's quite delicious, and there's they've already taken care of all the sugar. So you have to feed them what they like. That's their business, and our business, of course, is to avoid the sugar. And I already mentioned that I had, 4 ounces of sauerkraut, which is an organic, really crispy, delicious sauerkraut, and that just goes right on the side of the poached egg, and which, of course, is a yard egg from organic raised chickens, because I don't want the genetically modified corn being fed to the chicken that lays the egg, and I have the egg then subject of the poor chicken's inflammation from eating the genetically modified corn. So, I go to great lengths to get good, wholesome food, and that's taking care of my microbiome. And then the reason for these cultured products is because they're bringing this very species of lactobacillus. These guys are transient, but when they go through, they leave lactic acid behind. And lactic acid in the GI tract, it nourishes a lot of other species, just like my kefir water, that we also need. And these lactobacs will chase off bad guys. So they're going down, sweeping the terrain, fermenting up some pesky sugars and things that might not be best to be laying around for Candida to find. So they just go in, eat up the food, crowd out everybody that's bad. And let's just go back to the days of when the health books in the 1970s were coming out with, the Hunza people living to be 150 years old, and the people in the Balkans living to be 120, and the commonality there, it was not the glacier water, it was the fact that they were all food fermenters, that they would let the bacteria work on the carrot or the turnip for a day or two, and so everyone should be having their own bacteria farm in their home with the fermented vegetables or the kefir water, if that's, if you like that, or kombucha would be another way, or kvass if you want to work with the beet, and just having these ferments are all sweetening your tummy. So for everybody who suffers from indigestion and tummy problems, don't blame it on your tummy, blame it on what you're putting in your mouth, and then start working the good guys in. Now, some people have a hard time with that. They have something called SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and that's a little bit different subject for another time maybe, because there's ways to get out of that situation, and it does involve engaging the brain, because they have to get their motility back and they have to get the overgrowth. But even the good guys can overgrow in our bodies when we do the wrong thing. So we get this beautiful balance of nature. Our brain and our immune system are very much involved with the cultivation of the species, and that's what I mean, if you build it, they will come. You build the right terrain, and the brain and the immune system set up the relationships with the microbial world, and all of a sudden, we don't want to be talking about killing bacteria all the time. We want to be talking about cultivating and feeding, the care and feeding of our gut microbiome, where it's the probiotic species, the for life species that support us and protect us from the really nasty pathogens of the world. And then when we're strong, we don't need to be taking all those drugs.
Wow.
I'm definitely opposed to antibiotics being in commercial meat, because they're killing us and killing our microbiome every time we eat a piece of meat that's not organically raised, or have an egg that's not organically raised. We can't be eating those antibiotics all the time. And then it's the overuse. Right? We're using soap, we're using fluoride toothpaste, we're using detergents in toothpaste. Colgate put out triclosan. Oh my goodness, that's an antibiotic in the toothpaste. You keep killing the bacteria in your mouth, and you keep growing the bad guys. And so we want to have good biofilms on our teeth of good probiotic species that protect our teeth and actually remineralize our teeth. Nature has the plan, and now through science we're learning. And so the human race now is suddenly now going, for the last 100 years, we've been on this massive campaign to eradicate every bacteria we see. Hand sanitizers, on and on. Everything to kill. And now it's time to learn that we can leave well enough alone, and we can cultivate the good guys, just like you want to cultivate some good vegetables in your garden. You don't necessarily want to cultivate a poisonous plant. So we do that with our bodies, and lo and behold, our bodies then respond and can turn us around, just like science is finding out how to clean up rivers with water hyacinth and so forth, that we're cutting it close, we fear, Nikki, that, we're just doing so much to tip the balance of nature. And, we say the glaciers are melting. But
wow,
there's still time.
Well, Jack, you have really given me a sense of hope now.
Well, good.
And I thank you for that, because it can really get daunting as far as where do we go, what do we do, how do we repair. And so you've really given so much information, and I thank you very much for your wisdom, how to heal ourselves again and how to be a part of the bigger picture. So for everybody listening, if you want to connect with Jack, I advise you to go to wellnesswiz.com, WELLNESS, Wiz, WIZ.com. And I'm very excited because you're giving us an article that you wrote personally that really has some great answers to people's gut questions. And I appreciate that so much, and people are going to get some great value out of that article, and I appreciate it that you're giving some freebies out there. People love freebies.
It'll introduce the microbiome and explain things you can do to start making your microbiome better, and you'll see right there on the Wellness Wiz page, you can download that article for free, and just so you know, there's no sales pitch or anything like that. It's pure information to try to help out, because we've all got to get our health and our tummies working better so we can have really a full and varied life experience, and hopefully bring a little joy to others. So that's what it's about, Nikki. I want to thank you so much for letting me visit with your group. You're doing a wonderful work.
Thank you so much, Jack, and you're amazing. And I look forward to more conversations with you in the future.
All righty. Y'all take care.